بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضاه أما بعد. So last lesson we began speaking about the things which excuse a person from fasting Ramadan. And the first excuse that we mentioned was sickness, illness. This is what we spoke about last lesson. Today we're going to move on to the second excuse. The second excuse, الثاني, السفر, traveling. Traveling is also from the excuses which allow a person to break their fast. فيباح للمسافر الفطر في رمضان. يباح للمسافر, it is permissible, it's allowed for the traveler to break their fast during Ramadan. ويجب عليه القضاء. ويجب عليه القضاء, but it is obligatory for him to repay it back. It's obligatory for the musafir to repay back the missed fasts. If they do break their fast due to traveling, they have to repay it back after Ramadan. لقوله تعالى, due to his saying the Most High, فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر. وقوله تعالى فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر. These two ayat, we quoted them when speaking about the person who was sick. The same ayat are quoted again because it mentioned فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا. So there's evidence for the sick person. There's also evidence for عَلَى سَفَرٍ, for the one who is traveling. So the same ayat. Whoever amongst you is sick or on a journey, then he has to repay back the same amount that he missed after Ramadan on other days. طيب. وَلِقَوْلِهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. Likewise, from the evidences showing that safar, traveling, is an excuse for breaking the fast, is the statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم لمن سأله عن الصيام في السفر. He said this to someone who asked him about fasting while traveling. The Prophet ﷺ said, إن شئت فصم, if you wish, fast, وإن شئت فأفطر, and if you wish, break your fast. So it's a concession. Do you have to take this concession? No, you don't have to if you don't want to. So you're allowed to fast. إن شئت فصم, if you want to fast, you can fast. But if you don't want to fast, then you can break your fast. So the concession is there. If you want to take it, you are allowed to take it. This is what we understand from this hadith. And this hadith is in Bukhari. This hadith is in Bukhari. وخرج إلى مكة صائما في رمضان. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he set out towards Mecca صائما, while fasting during Ramadan. And this hadith is the hadith of Ibn Abbas, which is reported by Bukhari also. And this hadith refers to the conquest of Mecca. The Prophet ﷺ left Medina heading towards Mecca to conquer it during Ramadan, and he was fasting on this day. فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ الْكَدِيدَ, when he reached Kadid. Kadid is a place near Medina. It's in between, so between Mecca and Medina, but closer to Medina. فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ الْكَدِيدَ, when he reached this area, أَفْطَر, he broke his fast. He broke his fast. So the Prophet was traveling. So when he reached this place, he broke his fast. So it shows that he was fasting. He knew that he was traveling and he fasted. And he broke his fast because of the traveling. So this is a practical demonstration of his words here. إن شئت فصم, so he wanted to fast, so he fasted. وإن شئت فأفطر, and if you want to break your fast, you can break your fast. So when he reached Kadid, he aftar, he broke his fast. فأفطر الناس, and likewise everyone else broke their fast. So we have the two ayat and two ahadith in Bukhari. Okay, in these two sentences, this one and the following one, the author is going to, or the authors are going to clarify to us which type of safar is it that allows a person to break their fast. Is it any type of safar, or does the safar have to meet certain criteria, certain conditions? They're going to mention something relating to the distance. There's a distance which is mentioned here. So something to do with the distance and something to do with the reason for traveling. So they're going to mention two conditions for this safar, this journey, this traveling to be one which is valid, which is one which excuses a person from fasting. It has to be of a certain distance and it has to be for certain reasons. طيب. So let's read inshallah. They mention وَيُبَاحُ الْفِطْرُ breaking the fast is permissible, it's allowed في السفر الطويل on a long journey. If it's a long journey, الذي يباح فيه قصر الصلاة, a long journey which allows a person to shorten the prayer. So if a person is traveling and he is a traveler, from the concessions that he is allowed is also to shorten the 4-unit prayers. 4-unit prayers you pray as 2. So instead of praying 4 dhuhr, you pray 2, and the same with Asr. Instead of 4, you pray 2, and the same with Isha. Instead of 4, you pray 2. Maghrib stays the same, 3, and Fajr stays the same, 2. So the 4-unit prayers are shortened half. You pray 2 instead of 4. So he's saying here, or they are saying that the fitr, breaking your fast, is allowed if it's a long journey, the same long journey which allows you to shorten the prayer. So not a journey, a trip to the local supermarket. A trip to the local supermarket is not considered a journey which allows you to break your fast. It has to be a traveling distance where you can shorten your prayer. What is this distance? وَهُوَ مَا يُقَدَّرُ بِثَمَانِيَةٍ وَأَرْبَعِينَ مِيلًا, and it is what the distance is estimated at 48 miles. A traveling distance of 48 miles is the travel distance which allows a person to shorten his prayer and break his fast. What is this equivalent to in terms of kilometers? حوالي 80 كيلومترا. It's 48 miles is approximately 80 kilometers. So the distance needs to be 80 kilometers approximately for a person to be allowed to break their fast. So according to what the authors are saying, a distance which is shorter than that is not considered to be a distance where a person is regarded as a traveler, where these concessions are applicable to him. Okay, now the second condition is in terms of the reason for traveling. وَالسَّفَرُ الْمُبِيحُ لِلْفِطْرِ فِي رَمَضَانَ هُوَ السَّفَرُ الْمُبَاحُ. The traveling which allows a person to break their fast during Ramadan is the traveling which is allowable. There's different types of traveling. Sometimes a person might travel to go and commit haram. This type of traveling is not permissible. There's traveling which is wajib, like for example a person traveling to go hajj. There's traveling which is recommended, like a person traveling to go visit his family, silatul rahim, tying in the ties of kinship. So safar, traveling, has different ahkam depending on the reasons behind it. So he's saying that for it to be a reason for you to break, an excuse to break your fast, it has to be an allowable travel. Okay. فَإِنْ كَانَ سَفَرَ مَعْصِيَةً. But if it is a travel which is a sinful traveling, you're going to commit a sin or that sort of nature, أو سفرا يراد به التحايل على الفطر, or it is a travel by which a person, he wants to cheat their way out of fasting. The person is just traveling so that they don't have to fast. لم يبح له الفطر بهذا السفر. It's not permissible for him to break his fast due to this type of safar. So the safar where a person is traveling to commit a sin, or he's only traveling to cheat his way out of fasting, this type of traveling is not an excuse for a person to break their fast. So the authors have mentioned 2 conditions for the safar. The safar has to be a distance 80 kilometers approximately and above. And the reason behind it has to be allowable. If it's not endorsed, it's something haram, or you're cheating your way out of fasting, then this is not permissible. طيب. وإن صام المسافر صح صومه وأجزاءه. If the traveler fasts, then his fast is valid. صح صومه is correct and valid. وأجزاءه, and it suffices him. He doesn't have to repay it back. It's sufficient for him. What's the proof for this? لحديث أنس رضي الله عنه. Due to the hadith of Anas رضي الله عنه, he said, كنا نسافر مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. We were traveling with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. فلم يعب الصائم على المفطر ولا المفطر على الصائم. And the fasting one did not criticize the one who was not fasting, and the one who was not fasting did not criticize the one who was fasting. So they were traveling with the Prophet ﷺ as a group. some were fasting and some were not fasting. Those who were fasting did not criticize those who were not fasting, and those who were not fasting did not criticize those who were fasting. And this hadith is reported by Bukhari also. This is proof to show that the fasting is valid and it's sufficient for a person if they wish to fast. If a person wishes to fast, then they are allowed to fast. ولكن بشرط ألا يشق عليه الصوم في السفر. However, it must be with the condition that, so it's allowed to fast, but بشرط, with the condition that لا يشق عليه الصوم في السفر, with the condition that it's not difficult upon him, fasting is not difficult upon him while traveling. فإن شق عليه, but if it is difficult upon him, أو أضر به, or it brings harm to him, فالفطر في حقه أفضل. If it's difficult for him or brings harm to him, then breaking the fast is better. In this circumstance, breaking the fast is better for this person. أخذا بالرخصة, taking the concession. لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم رأى في السفر رجلا صائما, because the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم رأى في السفر, he saw while traveling a man who was fasting. قد ظلل عليه من شدة الحر, he was being shaded because of the severe heat. He was being shaded because of the severe heat. وتجمع الناس حوله, and people gathered around him. فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم, so he صلى الله عليه وسلم said, ليس من البر الصيام في السفر. It is not from bir, righteousness, to fast while traveling. So here they did not criticize the one who was fasting, nor did the fasting criticize the one who was not fasting. Yet here the Prophet said it is not righteousness to fast while traveling. So the scholars have combined between the ahadith, and they've come to the conclusion that this is if it's not difficult upon the person to fast. And this applies, yani it's not righteousness to fast if it brings you harm or it is difficult upon you to fast while traveling. In this case, it's not righteousness for you to be fasting. طيب. And this hadith also, number 5, is reported by Bukhari. So here we see that the traveler has two states in terms of fasting. If it's not difficult for him to fast, if it's not difficult for a person to fast while traveling, then it's better for him to fast. It's better for him to fast, as Sheikh Uthaymeen, he mentions in Sharh al-Mumti'. If a person during Ramadan he is traveling, and during his travel it's not difficult for him to fast, then he should fast. This is what's better for him, although the concession is still there if he wants to take it. But what's the better option? The better option is for him to fast. That's if there's no difficulty. Okay, the second state is if it's difficult for a person to fast. If it's difficult for a person to fast, then avoiding the fast is better, based on this hadith. It's not from righteousness to fast. So taking the concession in this case, where it's difficult for a person to fast, taking the concession is the better option. طيب. So this is what we have taken in this lesson. We have taken the second excuse, which is traveling. Traveling allows a person to break their fast. If a person wishes to take that concession, he is allowed, and it is better for him to take that concession if it's difficult upon him. But if it's not difficult upon him, then it's better for him to leave off the concession and continue fasting. Tamam. The authors mentioned two conditions relating to which type of traveling allows a person to break their fast. One condition was in terms of the distance, and the second condition is in terms of the reason behind the travel. The reason behind the travel. We will read now the commentary or the correction of Sheikh Abu Musa, hafidhahulah, in regards to these two conditions. Because these two conditions, they are not entirely correct. These two conditions, they're not entirely correct. So let's read what Sheikh Abu Musa, he mentions. الثاني السفر. Speaking about the safar, they mention ويباح الفطر في السفر الطويل الذي يباح فيه قصر الصلاة وهو ما يقدر ب48 ميلا أي حوالي 80 كيلومترا. So this is what the Sheikh is going to speak about now in this correction. Sheikh says قلت الأرجح أن مسافة السفر ترجع إلى العرف لعدم الدليل على تحديدها. الأرجح, what's more correct, is that the distance for the travel, determining the distance, which distance is considered travel and which is not considered travel, this is something which returns back to the customs of the people. Why is that? Because there is no evidence which determines which safar is considered safar which allows a person to break their fast, and which safar, which distance is not considered to be one which allows a person to break their fast. There's no evidence. So whenever there's no evidence, we return back to the customs. Al-'ada muhakkama. We apply this principle. وقد تقدمت هذه المسألة في باب صلاة أهل الأعذار وهو الباب التاسع من كتاب الصلاة. The Sheikh, he says that this chapter, وقد تقدمت هذه المسألة, this issue has already preceded in the chapter of صلاة أهل الأعذار, the people, prayer of the people who have excuses. وهو الباب التاسع من كتاب الصلاة, and it is the 9th chapter from the book of prayer. طيب. So this is in terms of the safar, the opinion of the authors that the safar has to be at least 80 kilometers approximately. There's no evidence for this. There's no evidence for this. So which safar is it that determines whether you can break your fast or not? Returns back to the urf, which is the customs of the people. If the people consider traveling from here to a certain place to be safar, then that is safar. طيب. The second correction is with regards to the reason behind the travel. The authors mentioned it has to be an allowable travel for the concession to apply. But what's correct is, as the Sheikh is going to mention, he says, ثم قال والسفر المبيح للفطر في رمضان هو السفر المباح. So he's making a correction with regards to this point, that it has to be an allowable travel. قلت, I say, هذا غير صحيح. This is not correct. بل يجوز له الفطر في سفر المعصية. Rather, it's permissible for them to break their fast even if it's سفر معصية, a traveling for committing sin. ويأثم على سفره للمعصية. The person is sinful for traveling to commit a sin. He is sinful for this, no doubt. وقد تقدم ذلك في الباب المذكور, and this has been discussed in the aforementioned chapter. يعني باب صلاة أهل الأعذار, the prayer of the people of excuse. So here we have taken the second excuse, and that is traveling. So traveling is an excuse which allows a person to break their fast. And the travel which this applies to is if it is considered to be traveling according to the customs of the people. If it's a distance which the people consider to be traveling, then you're allowed to break your fast. If it is easy for you to fast, then you should fast. That's better for you. But if it's difficult for you to fast, then take the concession and break your fast. طيب. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.